it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I have an amazing woman that we're chatting with today. Lisa Caputo is a proven business leader and an expert in marketing, digital, customer experience, strategic communications, and public affairs. Lisa is currently and has been for a long time part of Travelers Companies, which is a component of the Dow 30. She also has worked in a variety of places. She worked for Citigroup and started up the Citigroup Women in Company Initiative. Walt Disney Companies. She worked for Hillary Clinton when Bill Clinton was in the White House. Lisa, more than anything, is a person who, as I have gotten to know, is lovely, believes in establishing relationships and the heart of really mentoring and doing good for others. So Lisa, welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, Ivy, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to join you.
So you have a great resume. You know, you have like on paper, you're like, this is an impressive woman. Like if I saw you for coffee, it's like, oh my God, we have so much to talk about, from kids to business and this and that. But when we look at your LinkedIn and things like that, it is very impressive. How did this career develop for you?
Well, you know, Ivy, I really appreciate the question because, you know, I've never had a grand plan in my career. In other words, I never set forth some kind of a path forward and said, oh, I want to end up in that spot. Rather, I took a very open mind to my career trajectory. When I finished graduate school, I'm actually a trained journalist, and I wasn't quite ready to move out to a small town in the Midwest to get started as a television reporter. And I thought, well, who are these people called press secretaries that I'm dealing with every day as an aspiring journalist? I think if I go and try to be a press secretary on Capitol Hill, that someday I will become a better journalist because I will have experienced the legislative process up close and personal, and be a more informed reporter when I eventually thought I would go back to the other side of the fence to reporting. And what happened was I literally got on a train that just took me in a direction and landed me in the White House remarkably. I never aspired to be there, but here I was, you know, I landed in the White House at the age of 28.
And wow, so that is impressive.
I was good fortune and being in the right place at the right time, and yes, hard work as well. But you know, again, I had great mentors. You know, I would take some calculated risks. I went off, you know, on a presidential campaign and met an incredible group of people, which then ended up connecting me to Bill Clinton and ultimately Hillary Clinton when President Clinton decided to seek the presidency when he was governor of Arkansas. So had I not done that one presidential campaign in 1988, where I met all of these incredible people, I probably never would have been connected into the Clinton campaign. So it does demonstrate, I think, the power of relationships, the power of the network, and the importance of maintaining it can really steer your career pathing in ways you otherwise wouldn't have expected. And so I always say, it's good not to have a grand plan and have the blinders on so that you can see and have the peripheral vision around the opportunities that could come across the transom that you may have never thought of.
You know, you're saying amazing things, and so much I want to jump in on. I will say, I had a grand plan till 23 when it blew up. And then when that grand plan blew up, I let go of the grand plan. And you're also, the value, you mentioned the value of relationships, and here on Her Success Story, many, many times, everybody who's listened to me or has followed me knows I'm a strong, strong believer in the relationships we build. But you said something that I don't want people to forget, and that is remember to stay connected to people. Remember to stay connected to people.
Very important.
Very important. You also brought up great mentorship. And, when you and I have spoken previously, we've talked about the value of mentors for women aren't always just women mentors. There's amazing men who really stand for us and really help create a pathway. What kind of, I know that has impacted some of your experience.
For sure. I mean, there's no doubt. As a young, aspiring journalist in Washington, I had a great mentor who was a professor actually at Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism. And I got my first job when I wasn't willing to kind of go off to the Midwest to a small town to be a television reporter, which was sort of seen as sort of the getting the gold ring, so to speak, and decided to work on Capitol Hill as a press secretary. I got my first job through a blind ad. I would go to Capitol Hill every Tuesday and I would put in my resume to these job listings blindly. And one day I got a call from a Michigan congressman's office. And honest to goodness, I will tell you, that congressman who never really wanted to publicize a lot, and I was his press secretary, he didn't want to publicize a lot because he was on the House Appropriations Committee, and that was all about bringing back dollars to the district for Army Corps of Engineers projects and infrastructure. And there was a rule, which was the subcommittee chairman, he was a subcommittee chair of appropriations, never outshines the chairman. And he taught me so much about the art of the backroom deal on Capitol Hill and how Congress works. But he really became a mentor. He really taught me how to navigate around within the House of Representatives. I watched how he navigated to accomplish things legislatively, and he allowed me to take a leave of absence to go on board that presidential campaign in 1988. And had he not done that, I probably would not have landed in the White House. He gave me the opportunity to go experience a presidential campaign, which was an incredible experience, despite the fact that the candidate at the time, Michael Dukakis, lost. But he really thought it would be beneficial for me and ultimately him. I came back, after the campaign was over, and I had a lot of new ideas on how to do things. But what quickly happened is I felt like I wanted to operate at a more rapid pace, and that then landed me in the U.S. Senate, working for a senator from Colorado who was such a great legislator and big personality and big advocate of women. He was such a great proponent of women's issues and environmental issues. His name is former Senator Tim Wirth. He's for a long time chaired the UN Foundation, magnificent person and legislator. And again, another one who became a mentor to me. He probably doesn't know it, but he did. He showed me, how you bridge divides on both sides of the aisle, how you collaborate to get things done. And so I again, he's another one who let me take a leave of absence from his office to go on board the Clinton campaign. And, had that not happened, where would I be? I've been the great beneficiary of both male and female mentors. And I will tell you, in the political arena, it really has been a lot of male mentors and sponsors who kind of took me under their wing and navigated me. Mike McCurry, the former White House press secretary, was somebody, early on in my career who absolutely looked out for me, helped navigate me around in Washington, and it really made a difference. And I also would tell you that as a woman, that's really important because your hard work will get recognized when you have a champion, I think. And
I have to highlight this because when we show up and work well, work hard, show up and are our best.
Correct.
And are committed to being our best.
Correct.
Make sure your work is noticed. Make sure you have a champion. If you don't know who it is, find the ways to figure it out. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, because we sometimes we step back and we say, well, why did this one get this and this one didn't?
Long ago, a mentor once told me that it's really important to make sure your boss knows all the good things you are doing, not just when you do them, but on a consistent basis. To send a weekly email, I just want to give you an update on how things are progressing. And that was a female mentor of mine who was the former chairman and CEO of Time Inc. and more. She really was adamant about that. It was such great advice when I left Washington and moved into the private sector. She really gave me such sage advice, and really encouraged me to move beyond public relations and try to get into marketing. I had no marketing background because she used to say to me, marketing helps drive sales, which helps drive the bottom line. And you want to be part of helping to, generate revenue into the bottom line. So again, I would say as I navigated from government and the public sector into the private sector, what I have found is I've had a lot of female mentors in the private sector, also male, but I would say that a lot of women in business who've been in very senior roles have been great champions of mine, and to this day still are. And were it not for the roads and paths that they paved before me, I would have never benefited from advancing along in corporate America.
So you've moved to the private sector. I want to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives and work that has been so important to you that you have stood up for and created for women leaders and upcoming women leaders, because it's impressive.
Well, thank you for the question. I owe such a profound debt of gratitude to Hillary Clinton. I really do. I watched her up close and personally. I worked for her for a long time. I had the great fortune of spending some time with her this past weekend, and I'm constantly reminded when I'm with her what trails she's blazed and what I took away from being around her and watching her in action. And her passion for women's advocacy, I just think is awesome. And it really instilled in me, I think, my desire to become a great champion for women's voices and women's needs. And so when I was in the private sector, I left Washington to take a job at CBS, and then I ended up at Disney. And when I was at Disney, I received a phone call from Citigroup's then CFO, Heidi Miller. I didn't know her. And she called and she said, "Hi, I know we don't know each other." I said, "Well, I know who you are. You're on the cover of Fortune magazine as one of the 5 most powerful women in business. Why are you calling me?"
And I'm gonna jump in for 1 second. At this time, Citigroup was a huge player in the marketplace, the top.
It was. And that's a real testament to Sandy Weil, who
Yep.
remains to this day at the age of 90, a great mentor and friend to me. I adore the man. Heidi had the idea to start a women's financial services business within the world's largest financial services supermarket at the time, and went to Sandy as the chairman and CEO and said, Sandy, I have this idea. And Sandy said, I love this idea. Call this woman, Lisa Caputo. Now, why would he do that? Well, again, back to the relationships and the connections. I had met him, through my time in Washington, and he remembered me, and because he has a long memory, and so that's how that happened. She called and said, "What do you think? I'd love to meet with you about this." And I said to her, Heidi, I'm honored, but I'm not qualified to do that. I don't have an MBA. I have no background in financial services. And I'll never forget this. She said, that was a really silly and stupid thing to say. Don't do that again. And can you be in my office tomorrow at 4? And we both laughed, and off I went to her office, and she described her vision. And I was captivated by it. And I thought, well, this is a risk worth taking. She assured me that she would kind of steer me along, and she'd connect me to the right people internally to figure it out. And she did. And I jumped feet first. Now, that's not without going to my boss at Disney at the time and saying, I have this amazing opportunity to do a startup in the world's largest financial services company. I don't know where this is going to go. And he said to me, if it doesn't work out, you can always come back. And that again, more mentorship, more sponsorship. To me, being able to take that kind of a risk, but knowing I had a safety net, was huge. And so off I went to Citigroup. And unfortunately, Heidi left about 6 to 8 weeks after I arrived. She took a big job.
Wow.
She took a big job at Priceline, I remember, as the CFO. And do you know, she still continued to help me from where she was. Yep. And she connected me to people who also were helping me, within the company. And one of the people she introduced me to was Jamie Dimon. And Jamie was no longer at Citigroup. And don't you know, he helped me from the outside. He would call me and say, who have you talked to this week? And here's 3 people you should really talk to who could really help you figure this out. And I mean, to have that kind of, interest and thought, but also they really cared about kind of trying to stand up something that was really going to help women be financially secure and financially independent, was just extraordinary. And the fact that Sandy Weil was going to continue to dedicate resources to enable me to figure this out was really something. Even after Heidi left, it was just
I have to jump in here for a second, because I remember the time you're talking about. I mean, this was the time that our printing business was, Citigroup was part of they were our banks. They were, we were a strong line, and it was unheard of. It was unheard of. I remember when I went out on my own as a print, starting my own company, saying,
yeah,
I don't think Citi would look at me to open an account. They're not going to they're not going to do business with a one, right? It was unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
And it is so groundbreaking, and you're bringing tears to my eyes. I have to be honest with you. I wish I knew more at that time of what you were doing. I wish I knew more. And so now you've taken your mission and your knowledge and your relationships to travelers, and you've been here for years now.
I have. And, I will say this, the Women & Co., which was Citi's women's financial services business, was ahead of its time, I think, in so many ways. And when I look at my own family and my mother, years and years and years ago, when I was in the middle of doing Women & Co., my father had a heart attack, and he ended up being fine, but I'll never forget my mother panicking. If God forbid the worst happened, she didn't know how to handle the finances. And again, I thought to myself, that just can't happen to women no matter what their ages are. So yes, I've now landed at Travelers, which I love. And I love it, not just because of the work I get to do every day, but yes, I have the ability to innovate here and work with an incredibly forward-thinking chairman and CEO, Alan Schnitzer, who really cares about the advancement of women. And he looked around in the insurance industry and said, there are not enough women in senior roles or running, agencies. We should really try to do something about that. We should foster a dialogue. We should really set up and support networks for women to support women. And it was his brainchild, and it's called She Travels. And I have the good and great fortune of basically structuring that for him, and my team runs it for him. And it's really become an amazing community of women in the insurance industry, both within our own company and then also the independent agents and brokers who are our partners. And we do a lot of really great content programming. We have a sizable LinkedIn group. We do some in-person events, and it's been fantastic. Another thing we're doing here at Travelers is, one of my colleagues saw that, a lot of business happens in financial services and in business on the golf course. And so we started an initiative here called She Golfs, which is trying to get women out on the golf course more, give them golf instruction, so they, like the men, can be part of the dialogue where business may happen. And in my own division, which is a sizable division, I have an effort called She Rises, which is all about providing opportunities for women in my division to network, across the departments that I oversee. And we've had great male support and allyship around this. I think it's not just mentorship and sponsorship, but the allyship too is so important for women.
I do think the allyship is important. And I think in this day and age, we have the ability to see more people to people. It thrills me to no end, as I've said, that to see where women have come. Is there still a road ahead? Yes, there always will be a road ahead for something. And I strongly believe there is a road ahead and further work to do. But I also want to acknowledge the work people like you, Lisa, have done in the past and where we are today in women in the workforce versus where we were all those years ago.
Well, I'm just one of many, right, trying to champion the cause. I will tell you, when I started the Women & Co. business at Citigroup, we started to see a trend. More and more women were going to graduate school, business school, law school, medical school. More and more women were becoming the chief financial officer in the household. More and more women were becoming the chief purchasing officer in the household. And what we are also seeing is that women were outliving men by 7 years. So it was really important to help them have the tools in order and the information in order to make financial decisions for themselves. Similarly, from a career pathing standpoint, you see them going, more and more women are going up the corporate ladder. This is a great thing. Now we need more women CEOs, We need more women in the boardroom. We need more diversity overall
Yes.
in leadership positions. And, again, I have such a forward-looking and fabulous chairman and CEO and Alan Schnitzer here. He talks all the time about how diversity is a business imperative. And I love that because it really, really is.
1,000%. And as we've seen, women's presence grow and things are moving in the right direction, that is an example of how we can start incorporating and including diversity and how we have to continue with diversity efforts. I know I could speak for myself. If I followed what people told me I should and could not, should do, should not do, could not do, I would be in an entirely different place in my life. And this show wouldn't be happening by far. In the way is it takes one, and one turns to two, two turns to four, four turns to eight. And that's always the attitude, how I want to see the multiplier continue to grow. Lisa, let me ask you one last question before you and I can do this. We can do a series, you and I.
I'd love that, Ivy.
And we can talk about that. And listeners, if you want that, you let us know. One tip you would pass down for the women leaders coming up today? You have so much sage advice. What is one thing you would pass down?
Well, I think I would say to the women coming up today, and, in a couple of years, that'll be my own daughter, is that it's really important to build your brand, your own personal brand. What are you good at? What do you stand for? What are your skills? And to build your network. And not just build the network. You've got to invest the time to maintain and nurture that network. And then finally, I would say, keep an open mind. Don't get stuck on one path forward, but rather allow yourself to be willing to explore and to be open to opportunities in fields, companies, disciplines that you otherwise never would have thought of. That is what I would say to that younger generation coming up, and to the generation who's there now. They have a responsibility to pay it forward to those women, to reach down and to pull them up and to mentor and sponsor them and provide that kind of I'd say leadership, responsible leadership.
I love that. I love that. Listeners, this is how we close the show. Take a moment, take a breath. Lisa shared so much knowledge, so much insight. Identify one thing. And there was a ton here. Identify one thing. And write down what your takeaway is, whether it be on a piece of paper, in your phone, whatever works for you. And then make the decision on the action that you're going to commit to. Because those actions, like the people, multiply. Thank you for joining us here on Her Success Story. Lisa, I can't thank you enough for taking such time out.
Oh, thank you, Ivy. What a pleasure. I could go on and on with you for sure.
And listeners, if this was helpful to you, share this episode forward with somebody else that would be helpful to, and feel free to hit subscribe, and we come into your inbox every Monday. Thanks again. See you next time.
Don't need your approval anymore, 'cause I've got mine.